Okay guys, we're here to do another video for consumer and produced surplus with calculations. This one's a little harder than the last one, I think, but I think they're all pretty easy if you have your digital notes in front of you and you're trying to remember the stuff that we did before. So this problem gives a supply and demand graph, and in this particular supply and demand graph, it's number 3 from 2015. They give us if you take a look at the demand curve, you see it's relatively vertical, meaning that that's an inelastic demand, and your supply looks to be unit elastic, maybe elastic. That's hard to say. I don't know that that's relevant to the problem, but I'm just throwing it out there so that we remember these things. Taking a look at letter A, then it says calculate the total producer surplus at the market equilibrium price and quantity. Show your work. Producer surplus is going to be this area right there. And so with producer surplus, then, they want you to calculate. That means that we have to, this is a triangle, of course, and they want this area. That means then that we're using this quantity and this price. So what that means for us, then, is that you just have to remember that it's a triangle, 1/2 of base times height. And so that's 1/2 of the base, which, going back to the problem, we saw the base being, let's just call it this here. Now this here is equivalent to this here, so that means your base is 20. And then your height is this here, and so that means your height is 20. And so 1/2 then of 20 times 20 is then the same as saying 1/2 of 400, which means your answer is 200. So your answer then for letter A, I believe, is 200. It does say show your work. Make sure you show all work. If you take a look at how I did mine, I itemized it with all the work here at every step of the way. It's important that you do that. They know now on this exam, since you're going to be taking it home, that you'll have a calculator in front of you, you'll have Google in front of you, you'll have everything in front of you. So you're going to need to show your work for the step-by-step process. So going on to the next part, letter B, it says if the government imposes a price ceiling at 16, no, I misread that, sorry. If the government imposes a price floor at 16, is there a surplus, shortage, or neither, and explain? Well, this is a trick question, because our equilibrium is 20. And remember what they're asking here, it says a floor. And they're putting a floor in at, looks to be 16, so that puts it here. And if the floor is below equilibrium, that means it's not binding. The purpose of a floor is to stop price from going down. In this case, price naturally is not going to get to the floor. Price will naturally stop at equilibrium. And that means that your answer for this question is neither. This floor is not binding. Price will naturally stop at equilibrium. So letter C, then, is what I was reading before, apparently. And letter C says if the government imposes a price ceiling of $12. Now a ceiling at $12 would get drawn here, and the purpose of a ceiling is to stop price from going up. In this case, the ceiling would stop price from going up to the equilibrium, and therefore it's going to stop it. That means at this spot right here, we're going to have our quantity demanded, and then at this spot right here, we're going to have our quantity supplied. And that means then that our quantity demanded in this problem is greater than our quantity supplied, 24 and 12. And so when the quantity demanded is greater than the quantity supplied, what we see is that we have what is called a shortage. The quantity demanded of 24 is greater than the quantity supplied of 12. This is a market failure. This market is not in equilibrium. And so your answer for letter C, if the government imposes a ceiling of 12, is there shortage, surplus, neither, explain. It is a shortage because in this instance, it's a binding price ceiling, making your quantity demanded greater than your quantity supplied. So now jumping to letter D, if instead the government restricts market output to 10 units. If the government restricts output to 10 units, that means we're at a line like this all the way up. And it asks you to calculate the deadweight loss. So it's the same principle. We have a market failure here. Market failure means we ought to be at 20. Government is restricting us to 10. That means this area has been lost to the entirety of the market for all people, both consumers and producers. So they want you to calculate the value of that area. Deadweight loss then is a triangle, and of course, yet again, 1/2 of base times height. So in this case, I think our height is going to be this spot here that goes from 10 to 20, so our height is 10. Our base then goes from 10 all the way up to 40, so that is a 30. So 30 times 10 is 300, and then what's 1/2 of that? That is $150. I believe our deadweight loss here is going to be $150. Finally, letter E. Letter E is the good one here. This is really the reason I wanted to do this problem. It's asking us to calculate elasticity. That's an old thing that we did a long time ago. In calculating elasticity, you have to remember a formula. There's 2 ways to do it, actually. We could remember the formula, which is, in this case, I'm going to write it on another screen. The formula is percentage, why is that not working? Percentage change of quantity demanded divided by percentage change in price. Sorry guys, my wife decided to feed the dogs and the cats and everything while I'm doing this. And so, in this instance, then percentage change quantity demand divided by percentage change in price. Got to go back to the graph because I forgot what these are. Okay, and so it says that in this problem that we have a change in price from 20 to 12. Now, we could do all the percentage change on that. That's a change of 8 of the original 20. That's a 40%. That would go on bottom. And then the change in quantity was 20. It was a 20, and then at 12, now we're at 24. So that'd be a change of 4 over the original 20. That is a 20%. That's a value of 0.5. That makes this good inelastic. What I just did there, though, is a little bit complicated. You have to know your math pretty well, and I think most of you guys do know your math pretty well, but there is probably an easier way to do this. The easier way to do this would most likely, for most of you, I think, need to be what we call the total revenue test. So the total revenue test, if you recall, what we know is that we have some rules for elasticity here. If price goes up and then our total revenue goes up, we have what is called an inelastic good. And if price goes up, causing then our total revenue to go down, we have then what is called an elastic good. We could calculate the total revenue in this problem, and there'd be no problem to do that. Remember, total revenue, nice and easy, equals price times quantity. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the problem, and I'm going to take a look at the price times quantities here and see if I can solve all of it that way. And maybe you'll think that's easier. And so, taking a quick look at the original price of 20 times 20, we had a price of 20 times the quantity of 20. That means we had a total revenue of $400. Now, in this case, price goes down, and so when price went down to 12, our revenue is now 24. So that means we are 12 times 24, and so that's 240 plus 48, that's 288. And so look what happened here. When we see what our total revenue test, what we see is that price went down, causing then our total revenue to go down. This means we have an inelastic good. Because if price would have gone down and total revenue would have gone up, then more people would have bought the good. That would have been an elastic good. So when it says calculate the price elasticity of demand, show your work, and for E1, that meant that you had to use the percentage change method that I used. And the percentage change method that I used, if you recall, it was 0.5. Go back and look at the math that I did there. I could redo that if you need me to. You just message me on the board if you need me to do that. And then looking at CE2, it says, is this demand perfectly elastic, relatively elastic, unit elastic, relatively inelastic? Well, we know this is relatively inelastic. We know it's relatively inelastic because of 2 reasons. We have the total revenue test. That was our first reason, and that was our solution here. But your other answer could have been that if the elasticity coefficient or the elasticity value is less than 1, then what we see is that that is an inelastic good. And so, this one felt choppy to me. My wife making all sorts of noise was loads of fun for you guys too, I think. And so, I hope that helped. Let me know if this one was confusing. I can go back and redo this if we need to. Thanks, guys.